Hey everyone, Carla here. Welcome to week 3 of your 10-week shred. So, this evening, today, we want to be sort of elaborating a little bit more and continuing on from where we sort of left off last week. So, last week, we went deeper down the rabbit hole talking about macros and what are macros, which we came to the conclusion that it's basically just the nutrition that makes up the calories that you ingest. So your fats, your carbohydrates, and your protein. And we went through a bit of a list of examples of those. And then we spoke about how do you actually calculate what macros you should be starting on as your baseline. So we spoke a little bit about that. So I'm really expecting that you've all watched last week's recording. And if anyone had any questions, I would have expected that they throw those questions either into the chat group or into the group. So I'm assuming that everyone is pretty clear with how that works and that everyone has actually calculated their own macros numbers, what their protein, carbs, and fats should be to begin with as a starting point. As I mentioned last week, we just want a starting point, and then we can adapt things from there according to the feedback and the response your body is giving you, and things can be adjusted from there. So that's something that we will dive into a little bit more in the next few weeks. But today I really sort of wanted to kind of just go over a little bit of what we did last week, but also just introducing supplementation. So actually, Shaz, your question that you popped into the group was like perfect timing, because today is really all about supplementation and how to go, what to get, if any, and what are the basics to go for, because I know that if you walk into a supplementation store, a sports sub store, it can be totally overwhelming because there's so much stuff. And where do you even start? What do you get? What's good? What's not good? And the salespeople in there, they're salespeople. It's usually their store or they're managing it, so they want the sales. Um, yes, they can be quite knowledgeable, but you also need to have a bit of a base knowledge and not kind of get suckered in to, because you can spend a fortune on supplements if you're not careful, and a lot of them don't work. So I'm going to go through some of the basics that we use in our routine, and obviously the ones that do work quite well. The best supplementation is actually eating really well. So first and foremost, nutrition is absolute key to giving your body everything that it needs. But we all know that the food that we eat today is quite often void of a lot of nutrients. So there definitely is a place for supplementation in our routine. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of that and just not confuse you, but try to just outline the basics and keep things simple, because I find that that's the best approach. Keep it simple. Don't complicate things. You know, you're always going to have people saying, oh, you need this and you need that. And you've got to make sure that, you know, your salt is balanced and all of these sorts of things. And you need carb blockers and you need this and that. And you don't need all of that stuff. You just want to keep it really simple, stick to the basics that we know work, and not spend not spend a fortune on supplementation. So, guys, by now you should be week 3. You should be starting to get into a really good rhythm with your food, with your nutrition, and also starting to get into a bit of a rhythm with your exercise and training. If you're still struggling a little bit, don't panic. Keep pushing, keep trying. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and undoing bad habits that we've picked up along the way, and sometimes bad habits that we've created and developed over decades, you know, doesn't change overnight. So be patient with yourself and keep going back to the plan. The nutrition guide is there to help you and use as a guideline, and the food lists are there if you get a little bit stuck as well. So if you're not too sure about the macros, and it's a bit confusing for you, please reach out. Otherwise, if you are purely just sticking with that nutrition guide from the files in the group, you'll be doing well, and you'll be pretty much hitting very close to your targets anyway, as long as you're picking an option from those lists. So if in doubt, always go back to the nutrition guide that we have supplied in the files. Otherwise, if you can try and get your head around the macros, please feel free to reach out, ask questions, because we're here to help you understand it a little bit more. Even if you have to go through last week's video a couple of times, perhaps on your walk, you know, put your headset on or your earphones and just listen to it as you're walking. I find if you, especially when you're learning something new, quite often it can take a couple of times before it kind of sinks in and you fully understand it. So feel free to use these recordings to go back to help you understand more. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you guys can see all of this. I'll just, I don't want to put it in, actually I can put it in present today. Okay, so this is kind of just going over a little bit of what we went through last week, how much to eat of each food group. So this was the formula that we went through. Your protein, or these are the suggested macros that all sports medicos across the globe agree on. So it's quite a range of protein, especially carbohydrates. Carbs are the ones which I mentioned last week you can play around with a little bit. Protein, how much protein you need in your diet will depend on how active you are. If you're someone who isn't really doing too much weight training, or perhaps you're just doing 1 or 2 sessions a week, you could stick with the slightly lower end, probably 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilo of lean body weight. If you're someone who's really quite active and you train 4-5 times a week, plus you do a little bit of cardio on top of that, then you would definitely want to start at the 2 grams per kilo of lean body weight. And then as your metabolism speeds up a little bit, you can increase that a little bit more. Carbohydrates, as mentioned before, you can really play around with quite a bit, depending on how carb sensitive you are. But as mentioned last week, as a baseline, we want to stick with that 2 grams of carbs per kilo of lean body weight to begin with, just as a starting point. And your fats sitting on at least 0.5 of a gram of fats per kilo of lean body weight. So this was the formula that we came up with or went through last week as an example. And this is basically what I'm suggesting that you all start on: 2 grams per kilo of lean body weight, 2 grams of carbs per kilo of lean body weight, and roughly 0.5, maybe a little bit more, of fats per kilo of lean body weight. That's a great starting point to get your baseline and then adjust things from there. So as your metabolism speeds up, you can definitely increase those carbs very slowly. So this is something that we will be going through over the next few weeks as well. So it's really important to know that nutrition is constantly evolving and it should never stay the same. So I think I mentioned last week that what you eat on a training day should be different to what you eat on a non-training day. The reason for that is when you're active, your body needs more fuel. It's kind of like driving around in your car. On one day, if you've had a lot of driving to do into the city, out to country, back and forth from school drop-offs, back to the gym, and if you've done a lot of driving in one day, you're going to need to fill your car up, right? So the body's the same compared to a day where you've just been at home and you haven't done much driving at all. You won't need to fill your car up until a little bit later. So your nutrition should simulate that kind of theory as well. So macros timing, when to eat. We did go through last week. You really want to be aiming to eat every 2 to 3 hours, whether that's a snack or an actual meal. So you have your main meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then you have meals in between there or snacks in between there. I actually just call everything a meal. It's easier that way, and especially when you're having multiple meals, it's easier just to count meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, whether it's a snack or, a main meal, doesn't really matter. It's still just classified as fuel into the body. Understanding when to eat, your protein, your carbs, and your fats so that the body is receiving what it needs. For example, when is the best time to eat your starchy carbs? So we talked about what are starchy carbs. Well, they're the carbohydrates that give us lots of energy, but depending on the type of carb that it is, will depend on whether it's fast acting or slow acting carbs. So we're basically talking about starchy carbs. We're talking about your rice, bread, potatoes, sweet potato, those or oats, starchy carb. They're the starchy carbs that we're talking about. And the best time to have those is in the meal after you've been active. So, straight after training, it is crucial that you have a portion of starchy carbs in that meal after you train. Basically, because your fuel tank is empty. And what you fill your fuel tank with, your body's going to soak it up and absorb it and use it straight away. Um, so that is a big rule to take note of, making sure that you have a portion of starchy carbs straight after training. So, what is a portion? A cup. A cup of rice, a cup of sweet potato, a cup of white potato, 40 grams roughly of oats will give you a good cup cooked of oats. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So all of that will give you roughly, give or take 5 grams, about 30 grams of actual carbohydrates in something like that. So, like I mentioned before, we want to make sure that our meals are evenly spaced out throughout the day. So, 2 to 3 hours apart is totally fine. Anything stretching longer than the 3 hours, if you're going longer, like 4, 5 hours or more, if you've skipped a meal, if you've forgotten to prepare some food and take with you, then you're going to run into a bit of trouble, because after a period of time your body starts, or your metabolism starts to slow down, because your body doesn't know when it's going to get food again, so it slows everything down. Then quite often what happens is you get so hungry that you overeat and you eat a larger portion, but your body can actually only absorb so much in the one sitting. Anything else over and above what it can use at the time gets stored as fat, regardless of what it is. So that's why we want to have that protein pacing throughout the day, evenly spaced out, and um, and no really large meals, because your body can only use so much. So this is where we can talk a little bit about our supplementation. Like I mentioned before, we do need to consider some supplementation. I might actually just sort of stop sharing for a moment there, because I've got some examples here. So I'm just going to go through what some of the things that I use on a regular basis. Same with George and Michelle as well. That really helps with muscle recovery, and it just helps you perform a little bit better, and keeps the body going a little bit smoother. So one thing I do suggest, especially for those who are training in the gym and training fairly intensely, I suggest to put a scoop of your branched chain amino acids. That's one that I use. You can see the BCAAs, and this one's actually a blend of essential aminos and BCAAs. So your BCAAs are just your branched chain amino acids. There's lots of different flavors, lots of different brands, and pretty much BCAAs are BCAAs. You can't really go wrong. Just be careful though, to always look on the back, because some of them do have caffeine. They add caffeine in there. So you don't really want to be getting the branched chain aminos with caffeine. It's not necessary. if you want a bit of a pick-me-up, just have coffee. Just have a coffee. And there's other things that you can take. We've got the Isogenics supplementation that we also use, and they have their e-shots, which are just a natural energy booster. So there's things like that on the market, but I find that just your plain branched chain amino acids, put 1 scoop into your water bottle and just drink it while you're training, just sip on it while you're training. Also, if it's like a really, really hot day, because I know in Australia we're heading into summertime. If it's a really, really hot day and you are going for a big walk or bike ride, these are great to put in your water bottle. So they're not harmful. Harlem, my 16-year-old son, he uses BCAs as well. He does a lot of sport. So they're not harmful. It's just branched chain amino acids. So, and you can get lots of different flavors. It makes the water taste pretty yummy. So that's something I would definitely suggest. If you are training in the gym regularly and your goal is to put on a bit of muscle, then your creatine is a great little supplement, and it does work. This is one of the ones that does actually work. And you just want to make sure that there's usually a 5 grams per serve, and just put a scoop in your water with your BCAs. Just on training days. If you're not doing a lot of weight training, don't bother. You don't need it. But if that's your goal, Shaz, that's something I would probably recommend for you and anyone who does weight train regularly, to get some creatine. And if your goal is to help put a little bit of muscle on, then that's definitely one that you should have in your cupboard. Recovery, good nutrition first and foremost. Get those carbs into you straight after training, and a good portion of protein, obviously. But things like magnesium are a really big help with muscle soreness, muscle recovery, those sorts of things. So not just any magnesium. There's quite a few different magnesiums on the market, and if you don't know what to look for, you'll end up getting the cheap and nasty ones. So you kind of want to stay away from anything that is just magnesium oxide, because that's pretty much just chalk. This one is a really good one. That's the one that George and I use. It's magnesium chelate, really great for muscle recovery. So that is Doctor's Best. Is it? Yeah, just Doctor's Best. And we get a lot of our stuff online from iHerb. It's just an online supplementation store. The other one, this is more for cardiovascular health. So that's magnesium taurate, because your heart is a muscle too. So magnesium taurate is more appropriate for cardiovascular health. And then the gold, ZMA, zinc and magnesium for recovery and repair, and also sleep aid. Don't take this all the time. We find that when we take it straight before bed. If we've been training, like we've had a few really, really hard sessions in a row, and where the body's just like screaming, and it's like, I just need to sleep really well tonight. We will generally take like 3 of these just before bed, and you will have the best sleep, but you'll have really weird dreams. But that's all good. And you might wake up a little bit kind of foggy. Um, but it's all natural zinc and magnesium, basically. So, look, you can go into also taking your fish oils, which help with your joint health. So fish oil, doesn't matter which one. Fish oil, the 1,000 milligrams. Um, they are a great option to have as well. Other than that, that's the extent. Like, I wouldn't really go into too much else. That's literally just keeping it really simple. And they're the main ones that we use on a fairly regular basis. So iHerb, once again, was where we get all of our magnesiums and ZMA and so forth. Any supplement store, you can get your branch chain aminos and your creatine. Just look out to make sure your BCAs don't have caffeine in it. Some people ask me, oh, what about fat burners? There's so many fat burners on the market. Do they work? I think I've tried them all, actually. I'm pretty sure I've tried just about every fat burner on the market, and I just don't know if they work. I think they don't work on their own. You still have to be eating extremely well, and for them to work well, you need to be in a bit of a deficit. So you need to be in that fat burning mode. So I kind of think that they're a bit of a waste of money, especially when you're just starting your journey. I would say, if you're going to take any fat burners, take them sort of down the track when your metabolism has sped up already, and it will sort of help a little bit. It'll give you that extra couple of percentage. Um, some of them are thermogenics, which will heat your body temperature up, increase your body temperature, and you will feel it. You'll actually really feel that. And some of them are actually just packed full of caffeine to make you think that they're working, but it's literally just the caffeine. So if you are going to take any fat burners, just make sure, once again, that they don't have too much caffeine in there. That's just masking. They're just trying to mask it and add in fillers to make you feel like they're actually working. Pre-workouts, that's another one. I'm not a fan at all. I think if you're relying on a pre-workout every time you have to train, then you got problems. If you just have a coffee, a little pick me up, or just get started. I find if you can just get started, get the body moving, get the blood pumping, then everything starts waking up, So I think to rely on pre-workouts every time you train is a bad idea. So I've never been a fan of pre-workouts. Most of them, once again, are just packed full of caffeine. They give you the jitters, and you can't train properly anyway. So stay natural as much as you can, and just stick with the basics is what I tend to suggest. So I'm kind of going to finish it up there, and hope that isn't too overwhelming. But once again, I want you to go over the macros, make sure that you've set your numbers. If you're not sure, post it into the group. Actually, it might be a really good idea if if you girls actually have set your macros, post it into the group chat. This will be a test to see if you've actually listened to these recordings. So post your macros into the chat group for all the VIPs. So that's a little bit of homework this week. Post your macros into the chat group with just the VIPs, because we do have some other ladies in the group that aren't in the VIPs. So, and they don't learn about macros on that side. You guys are special learning about macros. So let's do that. And if anyone's got any questions, please feel free, like I said before, feel free to reach out. I hope that sort of helps with supplementation, because I know that, you know, there's huge question marks on all of that. People just kind of at you, oh, you should get this, should get that, should get this. And like I mentioned before, just keep it really simple. Otherwise, you do spend a fortune. So I hope that helps, and have a really good week. We're heading into the weekend now. So make sure that you are prepared. And if you're going out somewhere, just check out the menu online before you head out there. So you've got an idea of what you're going to choose off the menu, and you're not, you know, there's no surprises. Choose wisely. If you're going to have a bit of a treat, have it guilt free. Make sure that you train that day and you stick with your food plan up until you have that treat. If it's a dinner out with friends or family, have it guilt free, because we want to create some balance. We don't want you to feel like you're constantly restricting yourself. There has to be balance. And to do that, you need an understanding of food, of nutrition. And if you can stick with your food plan through the whole day, be really on point, get your exercise in, then you can go out, enjoy your night out, guilt free, and it's done. You enjoy yourself and it's all good. And you just get back on the plan the next day, so that it doesn't turn into a cheat weekend. It's just a cheat meal or treat meal, whatever you want to call it, rather than the whole weekend of having a bit of a blowout over the whole weekend. So just be mindful. Always keep your goals in mind. And if they are important to you, if it's really important to you to reach those goals, then you need to keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're being tempted by, you know, external temptations, external factors, people saying, have a drink or just have a piece of cake. And if it's not planned, then it can kind of spiral you downwards. So keep control. This is your journey. It's all your choices. And enjoy the weekend. Absolutely enjoy the weekend. Stay active. And I'll see you guys next week.